Yo, what's up guys? I just wanted to push one last video out there before I start work tomorrow and step back a little bit from Lorcana content. So, a flute deck recently took first place at PAX Unplugged convention amongst a sea of red-purple, and flute stocks have been going up quite a bit. So I decided to take the deck for a spin. And the deck is legit. This is the deck list we're playing. It's almost identical to the original winners list by Dave Pendergrass. The only change I've made from the original is that it was running 2 0 to hero and 2 BR guests, but I've dropped the 0 to heroes in favor of 2 more BR guests. I think 4 BR guests is super important in setting up for turn 3 Ariels, and I also believe the winner, Dave, may have also mentioned that going forward he'd probably drop the 0 to heroes in favor of the BR guest as well. I won't go too deep into the entire deck as it's pretty similar to the typical Steelsong package that you see a lot, but I will talk about what it is about the flutes that make them toot. Sleepy's flute makes perfect sense in a Steelsong package. Comes out quickly, generates lore from songs, and has no ink activation cost to get lore. Finding the flute or multiple flutes is actually not too difficult as the deck cycles through its cards quite quickly using Ariel and Whole New Worlds, and it's very common to have 2 to 3 flutes in each game. Having no ink activation cost is also incredibly significant as aside from the ink spent casting it, once the flute is in play, it no longer disrupts the tempo of the deck by interfering with ink usage. To try and assess the strength of a card like Sleepy's Flute, we should look to other 2-drop cards to measure the lore generation value of the card. A card like Pinocchio, for example, is a 2-drop that typically generates 3 lore and sometimes 6. But due to removal, he can also sometimes generate 0 lore. To generate 6 lore, he usually requires another form of tempo or ink investment to protect him after he quests once, such as self-bounce cards or LeFou or bodyguards. For the sake of this video, let's just claim that the lore value generation of a card like Pinocchio typically has an average expectation of, let's say, 3 to 5 lore. If you ever let a Pinocchio get 9 lore in, he's way above expectation and you're probably losing the game. Let's also look at some other commonly played 2-drops like Cinderella, Simba, or Madame Mim Snake. These cards are all 1 lore characters, and I would say on average they generate from questing between 0 to 3 lore before dying or being replaced. But they all provide some sort of utility. Cinderella smooths out your hand and offers future shift potential into Big Cinderella. Simba offers bodyguard protecting your characters and is usually found in decks playing Rockstar Stitch, which synergizes into future card draw. Mim Snake usually quests for the most out of this group and provides the utility of self-bounce, which we all know by now is more of a benefit than a drawback. These characters are all able to take a defensive role as well, and preventing opponent lore has some sort of similar equivalency value as generating lore. Though it's difficult to properly give a lore valuation to the utility and defensive aspect of a character, for this video I'll assign all these characters at a lore value of let's say 3 to 4, when factoring in both utility and defense. If you look at all 2-drop characters played in the metagame, they must meet these minimum lore standards to remain competitive, and that's why you don't see cards like Minnie Mouse, Tamatoa, or Boone being played, as they don't typically meet the standards of 3 to 4 lore valuation from a combination of questing, defense, shift, or utility in the 2-drop slot. In a Lorcana game, if every card you play generated 3 to 4 lore worth of value, the game should typically be won after 7 cards are played, if everything is uncontested. But then you add in opponent interaction, defense and disruption, and tempo, and you have your average Lorcana game lasting around 9 to 10 rounds, which is in line with what Pixelborn data suggests. Now, a flute provides basically no direct utility other than lore, but in a way it also provides indirect utility as a way of transforming your character's act of singing into lore. When a character sings, they must exert themselves, and therefore you can't exert them to quest. But flute allows the act of exert to sing to also transfer into exert to generate lore. So ultimately, when looking at a flute from this valuation perspective, the question becomes, does a flute on average provide at least 3 to 4 points worth of expected lore value per game? And I think the answer certainly is yes. At 20 songs, which is a whopping 1/3 of the deck, and with the refilling power of Rockstar Stitch Engine and the Whole New World, flutes will rarely be in short supply of song fuel for the remainder of the game. Flutes also have the added benefit of being much more resilient to removal than characters, as the only two colors that can destroy items are steel and blue. So being an item allows the flute to exert an incredible amount of pressure against decks like red-purple, who run a lot of character control but have no way of dealing with items, and will eventually succumb to the endless tooting grind of Sleepy's flute. To make room for the flute and song heavy package, the Steelsong list has cut out giant Tinkerbells and a secondary form of card draw in the form of either Beast or Surfer Stitch. But the Rockstar engine and the Whole New World package is generally plenty enough to supply the draw engine of the deck. And Rockstar Stitch also has a few extra drawing targets, as the deck runs 4 2-drop Cinderellas, which is not typical of classic Steelsong lists. Every single 1-drop in the deck is also able to shift into a larger character, which allows every 1-drop to continuously become a threat all through the mid and late game, either through its ability to shift and sing, or shift and quest for extra lore. Speaking of shifting, the deck also runs 4 big Cinderellas, which is also atypical of Steelsong lists. This seems very logical, as the deck is running 8 base form shift Cinderella targets, and Big Cinderella is exceptionally good against steel decks, and covers this deck's natural weakness to steel, since steel runs Benja and big board wipes like swords and tanks. Anyways, let's jump into a few games I played on Pixelborn with the deck and see how it operates. Game 1, we're going first, and we're up against red-purple. We have an amazing starting hand with Ariel Wheel and Flute for turn 2. Only more perfect hand would be a 1-drop Cindy for singing Storm Rage on. Seeing that we don't have a 1-drop Cindy, I actually decide to get rid of both my removal songs, as I want to draw into my songs after going turn 1 Stitch, turn 2 Flute, turn 3 Ariel, turn 4 Wheel. I play Stitch, and he inks a friend and passes. On turn 2, I drop my Flute after inking Cindy. He inks another friends and says go. On turn 3, I get my Ariel out, and my board is set up to go tooting. I want to definitely drop my second Flute before wheeling away our hands. On his turn, he plays Evasive Mini. I go ahead and drop my second Flute, and I decide not to wheel or do anything with Ariel this turn. I just don't want him to kill my Ariel with a Fox Mim on his turn. He sings Teeth on his Mini to take out my Stitch, and then plays Goat. On my turn, I decide to delay another turn, as we're still a full turn away from Lady Tremaine, and I hardcast Swords to take out his Mini and gain 2 lore. I don't want to exert my Ariel again and leave her exposed to a Maui or Fox Mim, and red-purple generally doesn't run Dragonfire these days, so my Ariel should still be safe for at least another turn. On his turn, he inks a Maui, so we're happy we played around that, and plays an Arthur and then passes. On my turn, I decide to cast Storm Rage on his Arthur, hoping to draw into another removal, like Raging Fire or Swords, and I get a Queen. I ink the Queen and I play Cindy, and still hold off on the Whole New World, as my Ariel is still protected against turn 6 Tremaine now, with Cindy on board. He does end up playing Tremaine, and I sack my Cindy, and then he quests with Arthur and Goat, and sends the Goat back to his hand. On my turn, I draw a Rockstar Stitch and I play it, and it's time to wheel and toot the flutes. I wheel into another wheel, and I drop a small Cindy and pass. He quests in with Arthur and Tremaine and bounces Tremaine, and wipes the board with Be Prepared. Now, I say wipe the board, but the flutes remain. And I think this is the reason why the Flute deck did very well in the tournament against red-purple, as red-purple has no way of dealing with the items. On my turn, I play Rockstar Stitch and Cindy, protecting against his Lady Tremaine, and draw off Cindy. But I decide not to use Cindy's draw and discard trigger, as I'm fine with most of the parts of my hand. He plays a Maui, taking out my Cinderella, and draws a card with Maleficent. I play Ariel on my turn, searching for a removal song, and find Strength of a Raging Fire. I cast another character so I have enough to fire for 3 on the Maui. Then I toot the flutes for 2. I ink and play Simba as well and quest in with the Stitch now that Simba is protecting him from Maui. He plays Maleficent Dragon on my Stitch, but the game is over. I shift my Cinderella to hit for 3, and with another song in my hand and 2 flutes, I have lethal lore on board. If you guys were keeping track, during the game my 2 flutes tooted for 8 lore, soon to be 10 on the final turn. That's 5 lore per flute, and well worth their weight in ink. Game 2 we're going to be up against another purple deck, but this time it's purple steel. We got turn 2 shift queen if needed, and Ariel, but no wheel. Hopefully Ariel can find her way into a wheel and eventually some flutes. Turn 1 I queen and pass, and he plays a fire the cannons on my queen. I go ahead and play out a Simba on turn 2. He plays out a Jafar. On my turn I play Ariel, and I grab a Grab Your Swords. He plays a Tinkerbell and quests in with Jafar, seeing as it's about to die to a Swords. On my turn I draw into a whole new world, and decide to cast Strength of a Raging Fire on his Jafar instead of singing Swords, so I can sing Whole New World instead. I quest in with Simba to bodyguard my Ariel, and I play Stitch and pass my turn. I'm very happy to see that I made him discard 2 giant Tinkerbells with the wheel. On his turn he plays a goat and quests in with baby Tinkerbell. On my turn I take out his Tinkerbell with my Simba and a Storm Rage on. Then I play Ariel to get another singer on board, and I find a Be Our Guest. In the moment I had decided not to draw the Be Our Guest, as I was planning on wheeling on the turn after shifting a Cindy and inking a Cindy, so I wanted to leave more songs in the deck, but I think this is wrong, as I probably won't get that deep into my deck, and there's really not that much downside to taking the Be Our Guest. He hardcasts the Swords on his turn and kills everything on my board except for a Soul Ariel. On my turn I draw a flute and I play it. Then I cast Stitch and sing Wheel. I find a second flute and decide to play it to take 2 lore off my wheel this turn. He plays 4-drop Beast, killing off my Ariel, and then he fires one of my baby Stitches and plays Captain Hook and quests. On my turn I decide to kill off his goat and Captain Hook with a Swords, while gaining 2 lore off my flutes. Then I quest in with Stitch, offering him a trade if he wants to for his beast. I play a queen and see if it can survive for a shift wheel for next turn. On his turn he plays Captain Hook and Emo Beast after questing. Seems like he had no removal for my queen. I play an Ariel on my turn, finding a Storm Rage on. I shift queen and quest with her, allowing my Stitch to freely trade with his 4-drop beast. Then I cast Storm on his Captain Hook to protect my queen from it. I decide, since he probably doesn't have removal in his hand based on how he played his last turn, I'll delay my wheel again for another turn. Of course I toot for 2 with my flutes, because I cast Storm this turn. On his turn he decides to kill off my queen with his beast, while dropping a second Emo Beast and Maleficent. This allows me to hardcast Swords to remove his damage beast and Maleficent. And I don't have quite enough characters to remove his second beast with his Strength of his Raging Fire. So I just go ahead and ink it after tooting for 2 with my flutes again. At this point, my flutes have already generated 10 lore for me. With 4 ink, I can hopefully wheel into another 1-drop and Raging Fire, and look at that. Just as planned. I play Cindy and Raging Fire his beast to take it down and swing in for 1 with the Stitch. My opponent plays Tinkerbell and Raging Fires my Cindy as he's correctly worried about Cinderella Shift. But I have just enough ink to hardcast a Cindy while playing Be Our Guest to toot for 2 more lore. I quest in with Ariel and Stitch to put him 1 Cinderella swing away from lethal. Purple Steel has an extremely difficult time dealing with Big Cinderella, as their only real outs are either Elsa's or Yzma's. The game is lost and my opponent concedes despite playing quite well. Our total Flute Toot count? 12, or about 6 lore each. Alright, for our final game, we're against Monkey and going second. He's a very strong player who blasted his way through Grandmaster piloting Yellow-Purple Hyper Aggro, which was a great metagame call at the time. He also has a lot of extremely creative deck ideas and had a great red-yellow flute brew early on into the season. I really respect both his technical gameplay and clever deck brewing ideas. But today, it looks like he'll be playing a blue-green discard deck against us. He inks his first 2 turns, and I play a Simba. He plays Prince John on 3, which is very unlucky for him, because I have both Ariel and Swords in my hand as a response. I play Ariel, whiffing, but I'm not worried. He follows up to his turn 3 John with a Daisy Duck, getting ready to draw a bunch of cards while planning to destroy my hand. But his plans are quickly ruined as I sing out a sword killing his John, and then I play my flute to toot for 1. I play out my small Cindy as well. The plan is, if he plays another John next turn, I'll dump my Cinderella to his Daisy. Otherwise, I'll dump my Swords to try and get a Shift Cindy out next turn. He plays a Cogsworth and passes without questing. I don't draw an ink for Cindy, but a flute is pretty nice. I sing Swords to finish off Daisy, play Flute, and quest in with a Simba protecting everyone. I toot for 2, and I decided I want to be greedy and still hold this Cindy for a potential shift next turn. I think this is super greedy against a discard deck especially, and I think inking Cindy is definitely more correct. I get punished for my greed as he plays a John and Hypnotize, and this potentially allows him back into the game as I'm behind on 4 ink and he draws 2 cards off my discard with John. It's okay though, because we need drama for content. On my turn I draw a Queen, which makes me feel even worse about not inking Cinderella the turn before, and I have to go ahead and ink her. I quest in with everyone. It's time for our flutes to race the discard deck as he slowly begins to gain control of the game and board. He plays Hades on my Simba and quests in with Cogsworth to finally start racing on his own. I draw Storm Rage on, which I hit his 80s and draw into my 3rd flute. I go ahead and toot for 3 now. He has a Judy, which kills off one of my flutes, and quests in with everyone after playing a Jasper. I top deck a whole new world, and this will refill my gas tank for all my flutes, so I'm right back into the race. I wheel and toot for 2. I wheel into a Cindy, who I go ahead and shift swing for 3, and now he's 2 lore away from dead. He needs to have another Judy for my flute to survive. I play a baby Queen out as a plan C to shift if my flutes and Cindy can't get it done. On his turn, he plays Lucifer, desperately trying to get songs out of my hand. I get rid of a Storm Rage on, which doesn't really matter what I choose, but it's probably slightly better to keep it and discard a Raging Fire in case he does Judy a flute. He sings Sudden Chill, trying to dig deeper for another Judy, but he can't find one, and he quests in while locking my Cindy down with his Jasper. On my turn, I show him my shift queen for the win. But of course, I'm going to cast a song for my flutes to toot for lethal. He sees my queen and quickly concedes before I'm able to flute him to death. Total flute toots this game? 10. Almost. So yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I kind of rush it out since I start work tomorrow and will be fairly inactive for a while. I do think flute decks are definitely the real deal and not a meme. I definitely recommend taking it out for a spin on Pixelborn or on paper. And as always guys, thanks for watching.